Alright boys, welcome back to another video. Swaggy here. You can also find me over at Daily Colts. Today we're going to be reacting to Jim Irsay's letter that came out yesterday. It has 4.8 million views, over 2,500 comments, and it says that he believes in head coach Shane Steichen and general manager Chris Ballard. To me, as a fan of the team, this was a slap in the face. This was one of the most disappointing seasons the Colts have had in a long time. They were coming off of a 9-8 year where they were 10-15 yards away from winning the division with a backup quarterback. Anthony Richardson, even though he got hurt a lot, showed a lot of promise. And then you're going to next season, you've got one of the easiest schedules in the league. You bring back your key guys. You have a great draft with A.D. Mitchell and Leatu, and the team finishes with a losing record. The Colts, they've been stuck in mediocrity for a decade now. Chris Ballard's been here for that long. The team hasn't even won a divisional title. Every other team has won more than two. Even the Jacksonville Jaguars, who picked number one back-to-back years, they've won divisional titles. The Colts have only been to the playoffs twice in those years under Chris Ballard. It's just disappointing. Everyone deserves part of the blame, but what kind of message does it send to the fans that, hey, look, we just had an unbearable season? Jonathan Taylor obviously dropping the ball, half of a yard, not even half of a yard from scoring to put you up 20-7 in a must-win game. Anthony Richardson tapping out. Of course, Zaire Franklin and his antics. There's just been a lot of failures this year, and when you don't make changes and you just run it back, I mean, what are the Colts running back? Another 8-9, 9-8 season, and the schedule looks pretty tough. I'll make a whole separate video on that, but the Colts' schedule is going to be tough. So if they don't bring it, I mean, they're going to miss the playoffs once again. At that point, we're going to be talking about Steichen being gone and Richardson being gone. So if you're a Colts fan like me, you've got to be frustrated with this. But it sends a message as well that, hey, look, we've got one more chance. And I do think that Shane Steichen will go into this year with the right mindset. He definitely didn't come into this year's season with the right mindset, but I don't blame him entirely just because the team just didn't perform well. The defense was terrible. Anthony Richardson had one of the worst seasons accuracy-wise in the history of football. It was right up there with Tim Tebow. Richardson, 12 interceptions, 8 touchdowns, 47.5 QBRs, 27th, threw for 1,814 yards. He did do a lot with his legs, but not enough to where you can justify that. I mean, it just was not a good year for Richardson. And he started to pick it up after he ended up being benched. But you look at the Colts' schedule, and he had to go up against the Jets, the Lions, the Patriots, and yeah, the Titans was a win. So just the Colts, they didn't beat a single good team the entire year. They did compete with some, like the Vikings. That was an 8-point loss with Flacco. Texans, I don't consider them a very good team. I think Texans are pretty bad, if I'm being honest. They just happen to be in the worst division in the league. Steelers were not the same team week 4 when we beat them as they are now. And even the Steelers have lost 4 in a row. It's just bad football, man, all around. And to just bring back your head coach, your GM, and the quarterback, it just shows that this is a loser organization. And I honestly couldn't believe my eyes. I thought it was fake. Like, I thought I was being trolled, but then I saw it was from verified accounts that the Colts were running it back. Gus Bradley, there hasn't been any I guess reports about him, but I mean, if Bradley was coming back, you'd have to imagine that the Colts would have announced it by now. So, but also they haven't fired him. Lou Anarumo, the GM of the Bengals, got let go of. So who really knows? But still, I mean, I'm just looking at Jim Irsay, and I believe he's about 65, 66 years old, no longer walking. Comes out on some like scooter type of machine and talks to the players in the locker room, and nobody's going to know what he said. But then to just make a letter that you're bringing back Chris Ballard, who hasn't accomplished anything in his tenure as the GM. Shane Steichen, I thought, had a good first year. I thought he was disappointing this year. I don't think Steichen's the issue, though. I think Steichen can be a good head coach. He just, again, the GM has to do a little bit more to get him some help. And Steichen did want Richardson, so we can't really fault anyone else but him, because Steichen wanted Richardson. He compared him to sort of a hybrid of Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts. But yeah, Richardson just is a bad season, man. And I'll give him one more year, but if he continues to struggle, I mean, the Colts are going to have to let him go, because in order to win in the NFL, to even have a chance, you've got to have good quarterback play. Like, you look at the teams in the playoffs, how many teams in the playoffs didn't have good quarterback play? Like, C.J. Stroud had a down year, but Russ was okay, but you look at Jordan Love and Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix and Sam Darnold and Matthew Stafford and Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. All these guys had good years quarterback-wise, and Joe Burrow had an exceptional year. He's one of the craziest things we've ever seen is a Triple Crown winner, a Burrow who would have been MVP in any other season if the Bengals made the playoffs. Trey Hendrickson leading the league in sacks, and they don't make it. But the teams that didn't make the playoffs, like disappointing quarterback play, like Richardson, Dak, like before the injury, Kyler Murray had a down year for his standards. And of course, Geno Smith, I don't think Geno was bad, but he wasn't like anything great. So the teams that made the playoffs, their quarterbacks all crushed it. And for the Colts, they had bad quarterback play from Flacco and Richardson, but also defensively, they didn't get it done. And injuries, the Colts, they did deal with a lot of injuries, especially on the offensive line, but still, with their schedule, there was no reason for them to have missed the playoffs. The Colts lost to the Jags back in Week 5, and then they ended up losing to the Giants in Week 17. So if the Colts win both of those games, they go to the playoffs. Yeah, unfortunately for the Colts, they still would have missed the playoffs if they had gone 10-7 because the Bengals were 9-8, and if the Bengals were also 10-7, so if like the Bengals beat the Patriots in Week 1 and they all finished 10-7, the Colts would have had that tiebreaker for the conference record. But if the Colts had gone 10-7, nobody would really be complaining. Like, you go 10-7, Richardson, I don't think that would have been a problem if you go 10-7 and miss the playoffs. At that point, it's just like, okay, we'd have been talking about next season, like the Colts are really about to turn it up, but they go 8-9, and I just can't justify the thought process of bringing back Chris Ballard because I don't think he's been terrible. Like, he's done a solid job, but he just hasn't done enough being here so long to, again, just justify him staying. And I think what it comes down to is that Jim Irsay does like Chris Ballard, but also he doesn't want to have Ballard on the books and then pay another GM. So it's definitely a cheap move. But Jim Irsay, just unbelievable, man. This guy, clearly he's not cut out to be able to run this team. The Colts, they lucked out getting Peyton Manning, and then they lucked out getting the number 1 pick for Andrew Luck. But since then, obviously, since those guys left, there's been no even remotely close of success. Like, the Colts have made the playoffs one time since Luck left, and it was with Phillip Rivers. They were a wild card team, and they ended up losing in the first round or whatever. So, yeah, just another disappointing season. But even more disappointing than the season is the Colts not making any changes and not taking any action, especially after the scrutiny that they got from the press and from Pat McAfee, who, by the way, will no longer be renewing his season tickets, wasn't even at the final game in his suite. So, yeah, I don't know. Just Colts, man.